Joining me this morning from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Deputy Counsel, a.k.a. Lawyer Extraordinaire, Dan Lennington. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Meg.
You know, every time I have one of your colleagues, Skylar Croy, on, I always come up with a different title for him that has something to do with attorneys. So get used to it. Well, so let's talk about the misuse. And I mean, I color me cynical, but I'm not at all surprised by our tax. We're learning at the federal level how much waste, theft, and fraud there is. So it shouldn't be of any surprise to anyone how our tax dollars are being misused by Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, we have been, as you said, at the federal level attacking DEI for the past 4 years, since 2021, and has some extraordinary successes, and we've had some success against, in particular, how President Biden was running this program to build highways in America, but he was setting aside 10% or sometimes even more of the money for minority-owned businesses, not to the construction firms or the road builders that were actually the best and the lowest cost, but the ones that had the color of the skin that President Biden liked. Well, Tony Evers is running the same program, almost identical program. It's even more expanded here in the state of Wisconsin. He spends $200 million a year that is set aside for minority-owned businesses to purchase supplies, services, and build things for the state of Wisconsin. So this would include state roads that are being built, state buildings such as prisons or buildings at the universities. This would include purchasing supplies for state agencies or services like IT support or security guards or whatever the state spends its money on. It is setting aside a certain amount of money for minority-owned businesses. But of course, with Tony Evers, it's not all minorities. It's just some minorities that are supported by the Evers administration. So he does not, for example, recognize that certain people from Asia are actually Asian. He doesn't recognize them as minorities. So it's only certain racial categories. And so we have filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice in order to ask them to open an investigation into the Evers administration, into their use of race discrimination in how they spend our hard-earned tax dollars here in Wisconsin.
Well, are you confident he's going to comply?
Well, what the interesting hook here with President Trump is he has discovered something that I think is, if you're a Democrat, this should be kind of ironic to you, is that for the past 50 or 60 years, the federal government has been growing at an exponential rate. And one of the things that they do is they give out a lot of money. So every year, for example, the federal government gives out almost $2 trillion in contracts or grants. Many of those go to states, like the state of Wisconsin, or cities like Wausau. But those all come with strings attached. For example, you have to promise that if you receive federal funds that you don't discriminate based on race. And so what President Trump has done with his executive orders is said, okay, well, you've promised that you won't do race discrimination, and in my view, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is race discrimination. So if you do that, and I find out about it, I'm going to take that money away from you. And we have already started to see this at the federal level, is that the president and administration have taken away, I think it was from Columbia University yesterday, $400 million in grants because of their race discrimination against Jewish students. And so the administration is as serious as a heart attack when it comes to this stuff. And so if you are Marathon County, if you're the city of Wausau, if you're the state of Wisconsin, and you are receiving federal funds, you're getting grants for your police department, or you're getting grants to build roads or bridges, or you're getting some sort of assistance from the federal government in the form of a contract or some other assistance, and you are doing DEI, you are discriminating against your employees or members of the general public because of equity, and this would also include your local school districts, which receive between 10 and 15% of their budget from the federal government. You will risk having the feds yank that money, and they have already started to do that. So they are not joking when they say, if you do DEI, we're going to take your federal money away from you. So, just ask a local politician, just ask a local school board member, how would you like it if all the federal money got pulled out of our county or our city? And I think they would say, we wouldn't like that at all. And so the message to these places, I know there's some places that are more blue up there than red, especially in the Eau Claire area, perhaps even Stevens Point. Some of these areas that play with DEI, they are playing with fire, and they could lose a big chunk of their federal budget.
But that makes them more determined to be creative about how they hide it, don't you think?
Yes. And we have seen that just this week. I have documented on my account on X, I've documented 2 school districts that are hiding DEI changes from the federal government. I received a leaked email from the Neenah School District over in the Fox Valley, and the superintendent said to ensure that the terminology does not become a barrier to our mission of providing all students with equity, we will be adjusting the language associated with these roles. Effective Monday, March 4th, the titles of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator will be changed to Educational Access Coordinator, and the job title DEI Coach will be changed to Educational Access Coach. And so in this email, the superintendent is saying, hey, we want to stay under the radar. We don't want to lose our federal funds. And so to make sure that we do not draw any attention, we're just going to change the titles of our DEI employees. And this follows on what the University of Wisconsin does throughout all their campuses. They have changed DEI to inclusive excellence, is what they call it at the University of Wisconsin. So that was this Neenah, and then the Green Bay School Board had a meeting in which their members called President Trump's orders on DEI, they call them, quote, illegal, disgusting, deplorable, threatening, senseless, and stinks. And they vowed resistance. One member said, and I have this video on my X account, he said, hell no. Pardon my French so early in the morning, but he said, hell no, we will not comply. We will have civil disobedience. He used the word civil disobedience so that we continue to do the same work that we've been doing. And so that's Green Bay. That is Neenah. I got a call yesterday about Appleton School District. I'm sure the school districts throughout your listening area, there are many good ones, but I'm sure there are some very progressive school board members and superintendents that are entrenched and that they are planning resistance to us. So if your listeners hear about that, please reach out to me and let me know. I'd like to highlight that.
You know what's interesting, Dan, is that if it were the other way around, I mean, anything during the Biden administration, as you know, anything goes, or anything did go during the Biden administration. If there had been, what did you call it? Disobedience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that by conservative? Do you think that would have been championed by the mainstream media, and that Democrats would have been fine with that, or would they have been arresting people for their civil disobedience?
Yeah, what I had meant to articulate is that the Democrats have been and progressives have been constructing this top-down system where the feds are the boss, right? And the feds get to like boss around local school districts. The feds get to boss around states and tell you what to do. And now the shoe's on the other foot, and the federal government is in the control of Republicans, and now they're squealing like stuck pigs about local control and federalism and oh boy, states. I even heard one person, progressive on TV, say states' rights. Oh my goodness, we
What?
have states' rights. We
You're
have
kidding.
federalism. We have local control. How dare the president impose on the will of the people? They're saying exactly what conservative-minded people actually have been saying for decades now, is that the federal government is too big and does too much and imposes its will too much on local. But now that these local districts and cities are actually the ones who are violating the federal law, they don't want to comply now that it's being applied to them. So we have a hilarious goose and gander situation going on with the Democrats now that the federal government is firmly in control of conservative and Republican interests.
How inconvenient for them. You mentioned your ex account. We'll just segue here. Dan Lennington, can you be fired for not using correct pronouns at work?
If you have a religious objection, your employer must accommodate you, and this applies whether you work for a private company or whether you work for the government. Title VII is our major employment discrimination statute, and people know, for example, you can't fire someone for being black, right, under Title VII. Title VII also says you can't discriminate against someone because of their religion. And there was a fantastic Supreme Court case that came down last year that was argued by one of my former classmates from Hillsdale College, which said that an employer must reasonably accommodate any religious views and at work, even if it's a burden on the employer. And that changed decades and decades of case law. And so we have a client named Jordan Cernak who was a school teacher at the Argyle School District. And he was told by his principal that he had to refer to one or more students by a different name and different pronouns. And he said, hey, I can't call a girl he. That is he or him. A girl is a girl, and that is how God made them, and a boy is a boy, and that's how God made them. And so I can't refer to them by different pronouns. That violates my religious liberty. And so you need to provide me with accommodations. You need to allow me to do alternative things. Right? Maybe I could just refer to them as their first name. Maybe I don't have to refer to them at all. And the school district crammed this down and said, sorry, if you don't use the pronouns that we say you're supposed to use, even though you say it violates your religious beliefs, you're out of here. And he was effectively fired, and we filed a lawsuit against the Argyle School District, and they settled with us, and they paid $20,000 in damages. And this is actually going on a lot of places around the country. We have, you can actually see news stories about what's going on in different employers and things, and school districts and employers, private employers are actually settling these lawsuits. They are getting made. They're held accountable actually for firing employees who are using the pronouns that they don't approve of. So yes, if your employer says that you have to use the wrong pronouns for your colleague or a student at school, and you have a religious objection to that, and they have to accommodate you, and if they don't, they're in violation of Title VII, and so you should seek out an employment lawyer to provide advice. We typically don't do employment lawsuits, but this was a case, first impression here in Wisconsin that we did take. So Any old employment lawyer should be able to handle a case like this.
Well, and the moral of the story is that this is precedent setting. And
Yes.
if indeed other school districts even attempt to do something like this, they can look to Argyle School District in Wisconsin. You know, I looked it up while you were talking. 801 is the population in Argyle. I would have never believed that in a small town in America, small town in Wisconsin, something like this could happen. And it really goes to show how important it is to pay attention to what your local elected officials are doing and run for office to best represent your community.
Yeah, these even in small school districts, and I'm sure there's people listening today feel the same way. That even in small school districts that are in areas that might have voted, 60-70% for Trump, the school districts, in many cases, have been captured by these educational interests through the DPI, through the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, through the lawyers that sort of circulate in this area, and through the training that DPI has done all these years, and that these school districts are little sort of Soviet blocks in the middle of otherwise conservative areas. And for too long, we have ignored our school board elections, frankly, and it wasn't really until 2020, 2021 that parents started to wake up and started to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe a 15% turnout for our spring election is not a good idea anymore. We should probably start to go to the polls and let the school board know how we feel about our conservative values and our conservative interests in this otherwise conservative county. So yes, there's definitely been a mismatch in a lot of places around Wisconsin where there's a exceedingly progressive superintendent or principal or school board in an area that that votes well over 50% Republican, which just tells you that people are not paying attention to their local elections, which is something hopefully we are now changing up in Wisconsin.
Oh, I'll say, particularly when we've got a huge election, spring election on April 1st, and there are a lot of local races. Okay, so quick last question for you about this teacher that was, as you said, let go from the Argyle School District. Does he have a new job? Was he able to get his old job back, or how does that work for him?
He's doing fine now. So we've worked out the settlement, and he's in a good spot. So I don't want to say too much about it, but he's in a position that he's happy with, and he's going to be just fine. But the school district is not going to do this anymore, and not going to victimize anybody else, which is the main lesson from this, and it will be a net message to other school districts in the state and other employers too. Don't discriminate based on religious beliefs.
Amen. Gosh, and this could have, effects on other decisions, whether it's pronouns or something else, as you cited, religious beliefs that could potentially be in defense of those that cites religious beliefs for not, as an example, not wanting to get the poison COVID shot. I mean that at least I hope that this case can be cited for any kind of future litigation.
Yeah, the original case was about working on Sundays, about a postal employee who did not want to deliver Amazon packages on Sunday because of his religious beliefs, and he won that case. That was about your schedule, so that wasn't even about pronouns. Also, there's pronouns in bios. There's all sorts of social issues that raise sincerely held religious beliefs in the workplace, and employers cannot just ignore those anymore. Whether mandatory vaccination is an issue, I can't speak to that right now. We'd have to look at a case like that. Hopefully, we will never have another mandatory vaccination program in this country for many different reasons. But forcing you to do something that violates your sincerely held religious beliefs is prohibited by law. And if employers do that, they're going to have to pay damages. So that's the lesson.
And then, I mean, just in reviewing or being made aware of some of the cases where any kind of requests from employees that were rejected by their employer, and just how it seemed to be very arbitrary. I certainly hope that doesn't happen again, because I really feel sad for those whose religious exemptions were denied by their employer just a few years ago, because there was some human being that was evaluating based, determining whether or not someone was, I don't know, someone had religious beliefs, or someone had the right religious beliefs, or it seemed to me, as I read some of these applications, that it really was arbitrary.
Yeah, and we heard horror stories of employees who had to stand up in front of boards and had to justify their religious beliefs about COVID, and had to get letters from their pastors explaining that they were actually members of a church. All sorts of religious discrimination that was horrible, and hopefully we'll never have to go through that again. And so people should be on the lookout for that sort of behavior. But forcing people to take that vaccine, which turned out to be not safe like they promised it was, and not effective like they promised it was. Just to say the least, it wasn't as safe and effective in the way that they promised and swore up and down about it. And then people were really hurt by that, and we're dealing with those consequences every day.
Dan Lennington from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, thanks for joining me this morning. I appreciate your time, and thanks for all your hard work on behalf of our freedom and liberty here in Wisconsin.